Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Circle.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective.
Today we will discuss the daily edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 19th May 2022. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start the discussion. In our series of weekly answer writing practice from the DNS videos, this week's question is discuss the El Nino phenomena and its impact on Indian monsoon. You have to write the answer to this question in 150 words. Now you can post your answers in the comment section below before Saturday to get it evaluated. So write this answer in large numbers and post it on the ELEARN platform in the comment section of this particular question. The link to this question has been provided in the description box below. This article on page number 1 is related to the Supreme Court's decision to set free the convict in the Rajiv Gandhi, the former Prime Minister of India's murder case back in 1990s. In this regard, the convict was in jail for 31 long years and was convicted for the murder of the former Prime Minister of India, Rajiv Gandhi. In this line, the Supreme Court has invoked a very important article of the Indian Constitution, that is Article 142, to set the convict free. And this Article 142 provides certain extraordinary powers to the Supreme Court in this regard. So for us, from the exam perspective, the extraordinary powers under the Article 142 are very important. That is what exactly has been provided for in this Article 142 from the mains as well as the prelims examination perspective. Further, we'll look at what were the debates in the Constituent Assembly for providing such extraordinary powers under the Article 142. In this backdrop, the Supreme Court has discarded the decision of the governor to forward this mercy petition to the President of India. So in this regard, we will also look at the powers that have been provided to the President of India and the governors of the state for providing relief to the convicts under various articles like Article 72 and Article 161 in case of the governors of the state. And lastly, we'll look at why did the Supreme Court invoke this Article 142 in this present case, that is, what was the need of invoking such an article here. And all these points that we use here can be important for us from the mains examination perspective as well as important for us from the prelims examination perspective. Now, if you look at the timeline of the conviction of Perarivalan, who has been convicted in the murder case of the former Prime Minister of India, Rajiv Gandhi, there are various events that took place since 1991 when the former Prime Minister of India, Rajiv Gandhi, died in a bomb blast in Tamil Nadu. In this regard, in 1991, CBI arrested Perarivalan, who was 19 years only back then. In 1998, a Tada court sentenced 26 accused to death, including Perarivalan in the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case. So as the death sentence was provided in 1998, in 2011, the execution of all these convicts was fixed for September 9, 2011. However, in 2014, the Supreme Court commuted the death sentence on the grounds of delay in disposition of the mercy petitions of these convicts. In this regard, when the Supreme Court commuted the death sentence of the convicts, the Tamil Nadu cabinet, immediately after the decision of the Supreme Court, decided to release all these convicts, including Perarivalan. Further, in 2015, Supreme Court said that the centre will have to decide whether the convicts can be released or not, because already the Tamil Nadu cabinet had decided. However, the Supreme Court in its observation in 2015 had said that it is for the centre to decide whether the convicts can be released or not. In 2017, there was another striking revelation by one of the former CBI officers, and he made that the CBI omitted a part of the Perarivalan's confession, and that is why justice was not delivered properly. So in 2018, a 3-judge bench of the Supreme Court gave the centre 3 months to decide on the release of the convicts. And after that, the central government rejected the Tamil Nadu government's request. So in 2018, again, the Tamil Nadu government decided to recommend the governor the release of all these convicts. However, even when the Tamil Nadu government recommended the governor to release all the convicts, these convicts were not released because of delay in the finalization of this petition by the governor. In this regard, the governor had forwarded these recommendations of the cabinet for the consideration of the president. And the Supreme Court observed that this forwarding of the consideration of the cabinet's decision to the president was unconstitutional. And that is why yesterday the Supreme Court invoked the Article 142 of the Indian Constitution to release the convicts of the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case. That is, Perarivalan was released yesterday. In this regard, let us try and understand what exactly is this Article 142 of the Indian Constitution that provides extraordinary powers to the Supreme Court to deliver justice. So, if you look at the Article 142, Section 1, it reads that the Supreme Court, in the exercise of its jurisdiction, may pass such decree or make such order as is necessary for doing complete justice in any cause or matter pending before it. Further, any decree so passed or order so made shall be enforceable throughout the territory of India in such manner as may be prescribed by or under any law made by the Parliament, and until provision in that behalf is so made in such manner as the President may by order prescribe. So, the main thing to note here is that this extraordinary power has been provided to the Supreme Court to deliver complete justice where the Supreme Court feels that the justice has not been delivered. Which means that the Supreme Court can pass any decree or any order which it seems necessary for doing complete justice in any particular case which is pending before it. So let us understand what exactly is the idea behind such Article 142 in the Indian Constitution, and also what are the important instances when this particular article has been invoked by the Supreme Court of India. So Article 142 of the Indian Constitution provides this special and extraordinary power to the Supreme Court to do the complete justice to the litigants who have suffered traversed illegality and injustice in the proceedings. In this case also we have seen that the convicts were in jail for 31 long years, and various recommendations have been provided by the Tamil Nadu government to release these convicts. However, this thing did not happen. Further, if you look at the past instances when the Supreme Court has invoked this Article 142, it was invoked in the Bhopal gas tragedy case of 1984. Further, the Supreme Court had invoked this article in the Babri Masjid demolition case. And also, it used this article or invoked this article for liquor ban sale along 500 meters along the national and the state highways in order to prevent the drunken driving. So in this regard, what was the thought of the constitutional makers in the Constituent Assembly for providing such extraordinary powers and incorporation of such an article in the Indian Constitution? In this regard, it has been said that the framers of the Constitution felt that this provision is of utmost significance to those people who have to suffer due to delay in getting their necessary reliefs due to the disadvantaged position of the judicial system. Also, one of the key members of the Constituent Assembly, Shri Thakur Das Bhargav, observed that natural justice is above law, and the Supreme Court will also be above the law in the sense that it shall have full right to pass any order that it considers just. And this gives almost unlimited powers to the Supreme Court. Therefore, the Supreme Court shall exercise these powers and will not be deterred from doing justice by the provision of any rule or law, executive practice, executive circular or regulation, etc. This simply means that the Article 142 was simply invoked in the Indian Constitution to provide extraordinary powers to the Supreme Court to deliver justice which will not be bound by any rule or any law or any executive practice, etc. And it can invoke it in special circumstances as it feels necessary to deliver complete justice. So as we have seen that the Supreme Court can invoke the Article 142 to provide necessary relief to all those people who have faced the delay at the hands of the judicial system, and also the overall process of the pardoning powers that have been provided to President as well as the governors of the state. And that is why it is important for us to understand as to why did the Supreme Court invoke this Article 142 in the present case. The first point, of course, is that there was delay in the justice because the convict was in jail for 31 years, and despite the Supreme Court's commutation of the death sentence of the convicts. In this regard, in the past, the Tamil Nadu government had decided the release of these convicts, but these convicts were not being released for past 7 to 8 years because of various issues. Let us look at all these issues now. So in the present case of release of Perarivalan, who is the convict in the assassination case of former Prime Minister of India, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, the Supreme Court considered that the convict had been under prolonged period of incarceration, that is, the convict had been in jail for a very long period of time. Further, the convict had satisfactory conduct in the jail and also while the convict was on parole. Also, the educational qualifications that were acquired by the convict during the incarceration, also the chronic ailments which were highlighted by the medical grounds of the convict, all were the grounds that were used by the Supreme Court to invoke the Article 142, which is an extraordinary power to do complete justice. Further, the Supreme Court said that in 2018, when the state cabinet of Tamil Nadu had recommended the governor to exercise the power provided under Article 161 of the Indian Constitution and release all the 7 convicts involved in the case, this had been pending till date. And this inordinate delay in the release of the convicts under the Article 161 and the recommendations of the cabinet were used as a ground by the Supreme Court to invoke the Article 142. So, what was the decision of the cabinet and what was the observation of the Supreme Court in this regard? Let us look at that. So, the cabinet of the Tamil Nadu had decided to release all the 7 convicts which were involved in the assassination case that was concerned with the assassination of former Prime Minister of India Rajiv Gandhi. And the governor had kept it pending for a long period of time and had further forwarded this recommendation of the cabinet to the President of India in January 2021. So, on this, the Supreme Court has observed that the reference of the recommendation of the Tamil Nadu cabinet by the governor to the President of India and 2.5 years after such recommendation has been made is without any constitutional backing. That is, the recommendation of the Tamil Nadu cabinet to the governor was under Article 161 and the forwarding of such recommendation to the President was unconstitutional, and also the delay of 2.5 years after such recommendation had been made was also without any constitutional backing. So, in this backdrop, let us look at the Article 161 under which the cabinet had recommended the release of all these convicts to the governor of the state of Tamil Nadu. Now, as you might be aware that the Article 72 of the Indian Constitution empowers the President of India to grant pardons and to suspend, remit or commute the sentences in certain cases. And a similar article has been provided in the Indian Constitution which deals with the power of the governor in this regard. And the Article 161 empowers the governor to grant pardons, reprieves, respites and remissions of the punishment, to suspend, remit or commute the sentence of any person convicted of any offence against any law relating to a matter to which the executive power of the state extends. Further, Article 162 provides the jurisdiction of the state executive's power, and it provides that the executive power of the state shall extend to all such matters with respect to which the legislature of the state has power to make laws. So, on all the matters on which the state legislature has the power to make laws, on all such matters, the state executive has the power also. Further, Article 163 provides that there shall be a council of the ministers with the chief minister at the head to aid and advise the governor in exercise of his functions, except insofar as he or she is by or under the constitution required to exercise in his or her function in his or her discretion. That is, whenever the governor is not required to act under discretion as provided in the Indian Constitution, the governor is bound by the advice of the State Council of the Minister headed by the Chief Minister. So, on Article 161, the Supreme Court has observed that the governor is the formal head and sole repository of executive power. But the governor is incapable of acting except on and according to the advice of his Council of Minister. That is, the governor is bound by the advice of the Council of the Minister unless the governor is required to act in his discretion, which has been provided for in the discretionary powers related to the governor. Further, the Supreme Court observed that the state government, whether the governor likes it or not, can advise and act under the Article 161, and the governor will be bound by such advice. And in the present case, the Supreme Court observed that the recommendations of the State Council of Minister for the commutation and the release of the convicts was justified, and the governor was bound by these recommendations. And as such, the governor should not have forwarded these recommendations for the consideration of the President, and because of which there has been delay of almost 3 years in the release of the convicts. And that is why the Supreme Court has invoked these extraordinary powers under the Article 142 to order the release of the Perarivalan, who is a convict in the assassination case of the former Prime Minister of India. So let us look at the summary of whatever we have understood in this article. So the Cabinet of Tamil Nadu in 2018 had recommended the release of the convicts of the assassination of the former Prime Minister of India Rajiv Gandhi to the Governor of Tamil Nadu under Article 161. However, the governor delayed to act on this advice of the cabinet and did not take a decision for almost 2.5 years to 3 years. Further, the governor had forwarded the recommendation of the Tamil Nadu cabinet for the consideration of the president. However, the Supreme Court has observed that the governor under Article 161 is bound by the advice of the cabinet, and such a delay in the disposal by the governor and forwarding of such matter for the President's consideration does not have any sound constitutional backing. And that is why the Supreme Court invoked the Article 142 to deliver complete justice. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 1 is related to the cabinet decision of increasing the ethanol blending in petrol to 20% in the coming 3 years. And that is why the cabinet has recommended certain amendments in the National Policy on Biofuels that were released in 2018. In this regard, if you look at the previous year prelims question papers, in the year 2020, UPSC has asked a question that according to India's National Policy on Biofuels, which of the following can be used as a raw material for the production of biofuels? So basically, the National Policy on Biofuels of 2018 had provided certain materials which could be used for the production of biofuels, and that is why this question was asked in the year 2020. So in this regard, let us look at what exactly is ethanol, how the blending is done, further what are the key features of the National Biofuel Policy and what are the proposed amendments. And after that, we will look at certain merits and challenges in the utilization of the ethanol blending. So if you look at ethanol, it is basically an organic compound which is composed of carbon and hydrogen, and it is called as ethyl alcohol, and this ethyl alcohol is produced from biomass. So the chemical formula of ethyl alcohol is C2H5 and OH. Further important characteristic of ethanol is that it has higher octane number than gasoline, and that is why it improves the petrol's octane number, and that is why it has been used as one of the additives, and that is why ethanol is blended in petrol. Now, octane number or octane rating is simply a standard measure of a fuel's ability to withstand the compression in an internal combustion engine without detonating. Also, if you look at another important characteristic of ethanol, it has insignificant amount of water in it. Further, ethanol is one of the principal biofuels, and it is naturally produced by fermentation of sugars by yeast or via petrochemical processes such as ethylene hydration. So the names of these processes can be important for us. Further, it is an important ingredient in all alcoholic beverages. Also, it has medical applications, that is, it is used as an antiseptic and disinfectant. Also, it is used as a chemical solvent and is used in the synthesis of organic compounds. So the uses and the applications of ethanol can also be important for us from the prelims examination perspective. Now, if you look at the process of blending, mixing of ethanol with conventional fossil fuels like petrol and gasoline in different proportions is known as ethanol blending. And such ethanol blending is done in different proportions. For example, the E5 fuel simply has 5% ethanol and 95% gasoline. The E10 fuel similarly has 10% ethanol and 90% gasoline. Further, if you look at E85 fuel, it will have 85% ethanol and 15% gasoline, and E100 fuel will simply have 100% ethanol. Further, it needs to be understood that the compatibility of a vehicle with the level of ethanol blend is required to be defined by the vehicle manufacturers. Now, as the news headline highlighted that the new policy highlights that the ethanol blending will be done at 20%, which means that we will be using E20 fuel in the next 3 years. However, the concern presently is that the vehicles in India are not equipped with using E20 as a fuel. And that is why the vehicles will also need to be upgraded in the coming future. So this brings us to what is the strategy of Government of India as far as ethanol blending is concerned. In this regard, the Government of India had started a pilot project in 2001 and had considered 5% ethanol blending with petrol to retail outlets. Further, the Government of India decided to launch this ethanol blended program in 2003 for sale of 5% ethanol blended petrol in 9 states and 4 union territories. In 2006, the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas extended the 5% ethanol blending to 20 states and 4 union territories of the country. And the first national biofuel policy was made by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in the year 2009. And finally, in 2018, the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas notified the National Policy on Biofuels 2018. So this has been the timeline how the Government of India has highlighted its ethanol blending program and also came up with a national policy on biofuels in 2018. So if you look at the salient features of the National Policy on Biofuels 2018, it categorized biofuels as basic fuels and advanced biofuels. The basic fuels are basically first generation bioethanol and biodiesel. And the advanced biofuels simply include second generation ethanol or municipal solid waste to drop-in fuels and third generation biofuels, bio-CNG, etc. Further, the biofuel policy of 2018 also expanded the scope of raw materials for ethanol production by allowing usage of certain raw materials for the production of biofuels. And these included sugarcane juice, sugarcane containing materials like sugar beet, sweet sorghum, starch containing materials like corn, cassava, damaged food grains like wheat, broken rice, rotten potatoes, which are unfit for human consumption, could be used for ethanol production. And that is why in 2020 prelims examination, UPSC had asked a question related to this particular aspect. Further, this policy allowed the use of surplus food grains for the production of ethanol for blending with petrol, but with prior approval of National Biofuel Coordination Committee. Further, the policy set an indicative target of 20% blending of ethanol in petrol and a 5% blending of biodiesel in diesel by 2030. In this backdrop, let us first understand what are these first generation biofuels, second generation biofuels, and third generation biofuels as were highlighted by the National Policy on Biofuel 2018. So, the first generation biofuels are simply made from sugar, starch, vegetable oil, and animal fats using conventional technologies. So, the common first generation biofuels include bioalcohols, biodiesel, vegetable oil, bioethers, and biogas. Further, the second generation biofuels are produced from non food crops such as cellulosic biofuels, waste biomass, which includes the stock of wheat, corn, and food. Further, examples include biofuels like biohydrogen, biomethanol, etc. While the third generation biofuels are simply those biofuels which are produced from microorganisms like algae. So, this was the categorization of biofuels that was done by the Biofuels Policy of 2018. Now, this brings us to what are the proposed amendments in this biofuels policy. Let us look at this. So, in this line, the Cabinet has approved certain amendments to the National Biofuels Policy of 2018. Now, we are aware that the National Biofuels Policy of 2018 had included certain raw materials which could be used for the production of biofuels. In this line, the Cabinet has taken a decision to allow more feedstocks for the production of biofuels. However, which all items will be included in these feedstocks will be highlighted in the near future by the Government of India. Also, the target has been set up in the present amendment, that is to advance ethanol blending target of 20% of blending of ethanol in petrol to year 2025-26 from the earlier set target of 2030. That is, the target of 20% ethanol blending in petrol has been changed from 2030 to 2025 and 26. That is, the timeline has been reduced now. Further, the Government of India aims at promoting the production of biofuels in the country under the Make in India program. Also, the government is considering granting permission for the export of biofuels in specific cases. And as far as the nodal ministry or department is concerned, the Department of Food and Public Distribution is the nodal department for the promotion of fuel grade ethanol producing distilleries in the country. So, these are some amendments that have been proposed, and this is the nodal department that deals with promotion of fuel grade ethanol producing distilleries in the country. This brings us to what are the merits and the challenges in the utilization of ethanol blending. Now, to understand the importance of ethanol blending, we should be aware that India meets its crude oil requirements by imports. That is, more than 80% of the crude oil requirement of India is met through imports. And this leads to increase in the import bill of the Government of India, which contributes to the current account deficit. That is why the ethanol blending can become important, and it will lead to reduction in the import bill of the Government of India. That is, 20% blending has the potential to reduce annual fuel import bill by $4 billion or 30,000 crores. So this can be a very important contribution. Further, it will be a step in self-reliance and energy security, because the dependence on the import of fuel from the West Asia also becomes a part of India's foreign policy, because we are dependent on such crude oil imports. And that is why if we reduce such imports, it will provide us energy security and self-reliance. We all are aware that geopolitical events in West Asia adversely impact India's energy security. For example, the recent attack on Ukraine by Russia has increased the crude oil prices. Third important merit of blending ethanol with petrol is that it will provide additional income to the farmers through production of crops which are used in ethanol production. Also, it is estimated that it will also contribute to lower emissions of carbon monoxide, etc. Because according to Niti Aayog, higher reductions in the carbon monoxide emissions were observed with E20 fuel. Further, it has been estimated that the blending of ethanol improves oxygen content of the fuel and leads to complete combustion, thereby reducing the amount of pollutants that are given out into the environment. And also the ethanol blending will be important for better use of damaged crops. For example, rotten wheat and rice can be used for the production of biofuels. However, there are certain challenges presently. First challenge is that we will have to bring about certain changes in the vehicles. So in this case, the E10 fuel will not require much modification in the present vehicles. However, for introducing E20 blended fuel, it will require significant changes in the vehicles and that will increase the price of the vehicles. That is first challenge. Second challenge in the ethanol blending is that if biofuel production increases because of increased blending requirements, this will lead to land diversion from important agricultural crops. And this might adversely also impact India's food security. Further, we are aware that sugarcane and its products are one of the important raw materials that are used for biofuel production. And that is why diversion to such water intensive crops is further going to increase the water crisis in India. Also, presently, there is demand and supply mismatch. That is, bioethanol production capacity does not match the present demand by oil manufacturing companies. Also, there are issues associated with storage and usage of the biofuels. That is, ethanol is highly inflammable and it demands added precaution in all stages from production, transportation, and storages. Further, ethanol is highly corrosive and that is why it requires addition of anti-corrosive agents. Also, there is issue associated with efficiency, that is, according to Niti Aayog report, there will be a drop in the fuel efficiency by about 3 to 4%. So these are certain facts associated with the ethanol blending program, that is how it started, what exactly is ethanol, how it is produced, and what are first generation, second generation, and third generation biofuels, what are its merits and what are its challenges. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 8 is related to a recent report that has been released, which is named as Drought in Numbers Report, which is released by the United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification. And it highlights India's vulnerability to drought. In this regard, let us look at some basic understanding about drought as a disaster and what exactly are the guidelines of the National Disaster Management Authority in this regard. So if you look at the types of droughts, the National Commission on Agriculture in India has classified 3 types of droughts. These are meteorological, agricultural, and hydrological. Meteorological drought is simply defined as a situation when there is significant decrease from normal precipitation over an area. That is, when the decrease in precipitation is more than 10%. Hydrological droughts result from prolonged meteorological drought, which result in depletion of surface and subsurface water resources. While the agricultural drought is a situation when the soil moisture and the rainfall are inadequate to support healthy crop growth. Further, as far as droughts are concerned, state governments in India are the final authority when it comes to declaring a region as drought affected. And the indicators that are used by the state governments include rainfall deviation and dry spell, agriculture related issues, that is, availability of moisture for the growth of agricultural crops, vegetation indices based on remote sensing, soil moisture, and hydrology. Now, if you look at the major causes of droughts in India, first and foremost reason is the failure of monsoons. This is because the southwest monsoon accounts for about 70 to 80% of annual rainfall over major parts of India. And if there is late onset of monsoon, if the rainfall in the monsoon period is less as compared to the average rainfall, then this could lead to the drought-like situation. Further, if you look at the drought vulnerable areas of India, the most vulnerable areas to drought are, of course, the western India, including Rajasthan, etc., and also certain parts of central India, including the Vidarbha region of Maharashtra, Telangana, etc. Besides this, we all are aware that the monsoons are closely linked to the El Nino and the southern oscillations. So whenever there is El Nino event, there is drought-like situation in India. Now this brings us to another important differentiation, that is, what is the difference between droughts and desertification? So if you look at droughts, droughts are simply prolonged dry period in natural climate cycle. However, desertification is different from droughts. So if you look at desertification, it is the degradation of the land in arid, semi-arid and dry subhumid areas. And this degradation in the land is a result of various factors which can include climatic variations and can also include human activities. Now, one of the example of drought and desertification happening simultaneously is that of Madagascar. In this regard, it has been highlighted by the report of the World Food Programme that Madagascar is facing famine-like situation, and this has mainly been because of climate change. So because of climate change and decrease in rainfall, Madagascar is witnessing desertification along with drought-like situation. That is, climatic variations lead to desertification, However, human activities can also contribute to desertification. For example, in case of state of Punjab in India, because of over irrigation and overuse of fertilizers, the fertility of the land is decreasing. So that is what is known as desertification. Further, drought is simply a natural phenomena whose impacts can be exacerbated by human activities that are not adapted to local climate. For example, in case of Maharashtra, where drought-like situations exist, the farmers are resorting to sugarcane cultivation, which is a water-intensive crop. And this kind of situation also leads to a drought-like situation. Further, if you look at land degradation, it is simply the process of turning fertile land into less or non-productive land. Further, droughts occur frequently in the areas which are affected by desertification, while the cycles of drought and climatic disturbances can contribute to the development of desertification. That is, there is a correlation between the droughts and desertification also. Further, if you look at the issues in the handling of the drought in India, first issue is that of center-state non-cooperation in India. We are aware that the state governments are the ones which declare the drought in a particular area. Further, earlier what used to happen is that these states could approach the central government for drought relief without restrictions of category of drought and ask for monetary help under the Calamity Relief Fund and the National Calamity Contingency Fund. However, the central government released a new manual for drought management. And this drought management manual says that the states can ask for the central government's help only if the drought is of severe category. And as far as the parameters that are used to declare a drought as severe are extremely stringent. Further, in the past, there have been issues that there is chronic lack of investment in storage systems because of greater urbanization, and this has led to large-scale deforestation, leveling of water bodies like large ponds, lakes for legal and illegal construction, and this has added to water problems. So this kind of creates a situation which is similar to droughts. So normally, climatic factors are also responsible for drought. However, there are issues associated with management of the water and overexploitation of the resources, that is, human-induced droughts are also a phenomenon. Further, water-intensive crops are being grown in various areas, and this has largely been because of the policies of the government of providing subsidies to water-intensive crops. For example, the government provides fair and remunerative prices for sugarcane cultivation, which is a water-intensive crop. Also, crops like wheat, rice, all are water-intensive crops. And because of the subsidy and the minimum support price available on these crops, and that is why the farmers resort to growing of such crops with a view that they will be getting a minimum support price. However, these are water-intensive crops, and when such water-intensive crops are grown, they lead to drought-like situation. Also, we are aware that overexploitation of the groundwater is also one of the factors that lead to increasing drought-like situation because it leads to depletion in the groundwater. So since the government of India is providing subsidy in terms of usage of electricity, the farmers are resorting to overexploitation of the groundwater. And all these factors are leading to increasing issues in the handling of drought-like situation in India. This brings us to what exactly are the impacts of the drought. We are aware that the droughts can be categorized into 3-4 categories. First is, of course, the ecological and environmental. Second is economic impact. Third is social impact. As far as ecological and environmental impact are concerned, they adversely impact the water bodies, that is the level of water in the water storage, etc. Further, it leads to reduced forest cover because of reduced soil moisture. It also adversely impacts wildlife which are associated with the forest cover. And further, increasing frequency of droughts can lead to drying up of wetlands and aquifers. As far as economic impact are concerned, we are aware that majority of the population of India is employed in agriculture. And if agriculture fails, it is going to adversely impact the farmer community of India. Further, if the agriculture fails, it is also going to adversely impact the industries that are dependent on agriculture. And finally, we are aware that the social impacts of droughts can include migration, etc. This brings us to what exactly are the guidelines of National Disaster Management Authority on the management of droughts. Let us look at all these guidelines. So the National Disaster Management Guidelines highlight that the focus should be on creation of drought monitoring cells. So the first issue here is that of reporting of the droughts and how to ascertain that a drought-like situation has started. So first is creation of drought monitoring cells. That is, information regarding droughts is one of the important factors in management of the drought-like situation. And such drought monitoring cells should be created at state levels with requisite staff. Further, the focus should also be on preparation of vulnerability maps for each state by the state's disaster management committee. Also, the focus should be on development of real-time drought-related information by using information and communication technology. Further, the National Disaster Management Guidelines highlight that the focus should be on watershed development approach. That is, the focus should always be on management of the watershed, including rainwater harvesting, etc. Further, the guidelines highlight that there should be assessment of damage. This should include agricultural production, depletion of water resources, livestock population, land degradation and deforestation, as well as human health. Also, there should be development of drought-resistant crop varieties through large-scale research. Then there should be mitigation measures which should include cloud seeding, etc. Now, cloud seeding is a technology which includes the spraying of certain chemicals into the upper atmosphere, which leads to cloud formation and leads to rainfall. Then the guidelines also highlight about promoting crop diversification through sprinklers, drip irrigation systems, micro irrigation techniques, etc. Because presently, because of the MSP regime and subsidies, the focus has been on growing water intensive crops. Further, the guidelines highlight that the focus should be on prompt provision of credit in drought affected areas. Then there should be focus on afforestation, development of insurance products. Further, encouragement should be provided to NGOs, Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies for generating awareness among the farmers. Focus should also be on food and cattle feed and mineral mixture, which should be supplied to all productive animals to prevent distress sales of the cattle. And whenever necessary and feasible, the corporate sector should also be involved in supporting drought risk management efforts as a part of the corporate social responsibility. So these are certain guidelines of the National Disaster Management Authority related to the management of the droughts. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 10 is related to National Green Tribunal. In this regard, the Supreme Court has highlighted that the National Green Tribunal is not a case of extra delegation of powers, and this is primarily responsible for environmental rights protection in India and jurisdiction related to environmental factors. In this regard, let us look at what is NGT, what are the laws associated with NGT, and what are certain challenges in the functioning of the National Green Tribunal from a previous DNS video. So let us revise from that video key aspects related to NGT from both prelims as well as mains examination perspective. Now, as we all know that NGT was established in 2010 under the National Green Tribunal Act of 2010 that was passed by the central government. So this means that it is a statutory body which has been created by this Act of 2010. Now, the stated objective of creating the National Green Tribunal was to provide a specialized forum for effective and speedy disposal of the cases that are pertaining to environmental protection, conservation of forests, and for seeking compensation for damages that are caused by people or property due to violation of the environmental laws. So this means that it was created with the purpose of providing environmental justice. So in this regard, it is important for us to note the legal jurisdiction of the National Green Tribunal. And the NGT has the power to hear all the civil cases relating to the environmental issues. And the laws with which the National Green Tribunal deals have been listed in the Schedule 1 of the NGT Act. And these include the Water Act of 1974, the Water Cess Act of 1977, again the Forest Act of 1980, the Air Pollution Act 1981, Environmental Protection Act, Public Liability Insurance Act, and the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. However, one important thing that should be noted about the jurisdiction of the National Green Tribunal is that it has not been vested with powers to hear any matter relating to the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 and the Indian Forest Act of 1927. And also various laws that are enacted by the states relating to the forests, tree preservations, etc. And as such, specific issues related to these laws cannot be raised before the National Green Tribunal, and this is one of the important areas that can be asked in our preliminary examination. Further, similar to the other institutions like the National Human Rights Commission, etc., the NGT or the National Green Tribunal is not bound by the procedure laid down under the Code of Civil Procedure, and it shall be guided by the principles of natural justice. Further, the NGT is also not bound by the rules of evidence that are enshrined in the Indian Evidence Act of 1872. So these are basically the flexibilities that have been provided to the National Green Tribunal to ensure the environmental justice. Further, while passing the orders and the decisions and awards, the NGT applies the principle of sustainable development and also follows the precautionary principle and the polluter pays principle. Regarding the review and appeal, the orders of the NGT can be appealed to the Supreme Court within 90 days. Now, after this, let us look at the strengths of the National Green Tribunal and also some of the challenges in the functioning of the NGT from the mains examination perspective. So, first and foremost strength of the National Green Tribunal is that it offers a path for the evolution of environmental jurisprudence by setting up an alternative dispute resolution mechanism related to the environmental issues. Further, it plays a crucial role in curbing environmental damaging activities and also helps in reducing the burden of litigation in the higher courts on the environmental matters. So basically, it deburdenizes the higher judiciary on the environmental matters. Further, the NGT is less formal, it is less expensive, and is also a faster way of resolving disputes related to the environment. Also, the NGT has been instrumental in ensuring that the environmental impact assessment is strictly observed. And besides this, the independence of the NGT has been ensured by stating the principle that the chairperson and the members are not eligible for reappointment. So these are few strengths in the functioning of the National Green Tribunal. That is, it creates an alternative dispute resolution mechanism for environmental issues. It helps in curbing the environmental damaging activities, reduces the burden of litigation in higher courts. It is a less formal, less expensive and faster way of resolving issues related to environment, and also ensures the EIA norms are followed. However, there have been certain challenges in the functioning of the NGT. And first and foremost, we have learned about, that is, the Wildlife Protection Act, Scheduled Tribes Acts, etc. have been kept out of the NGT's jurisdiction, which is a limitation on the functioning of the NGT because all these acts are also related to the environment and have a bearing on the environment conservation and also on various issues related to the environment. So basically, this restricts the jurisdiction area of NGT and also hampers its functioning. Further, the NGT decisions are nowadays being challenged in various high courts under the writ jurisdiction of the High Court under Article 226. And it is at times asserted that the High Court is superior as compared to the NGT because the High Courts are constitutional bodies while the NGT is a statutory body. Also, we have seen that the Act provides that the decisions of NGT can be challenged in Supreme Court within a period of 90 days. However, they are still being challenged in High Courts. So there is lack of clarity on what kind of decisions can be challenged and where they can be challenged. Further, the NGT focuses on the environmental issues, and as such it has been criticized as being anti-economic growth and anti-development. And last but not the least, but the justice delivery mechanism is hindered by a limited number of regional branches, and we note that it has only 4 to 5 branches across India. So these are few points that can be used in writing answers related to the functioning and the challenges in the functioning of NGT or the National Green Tribunal in the mains examination. With this, let's take up the next news article now. With this, we conclude today's discussion, and this is the question for the day.